Thank you for your presence and stick-to-itness this afternoon. I'm Alan Rapp, and I am here to talk about my research into a practice that's popularly known as urban exploration or urban archaeology. People have different names for it. This activity is having its cultural moment in that it can be found on dozens of blogs and online forums, photo sharing systems, and has arguably spawned a new genre of photography. But in other ways, it is obscure and almost literally, often literally subterranean. Even though it's practiced by lay people, I think it has more to say about different ways of looking at the built environment than a whole raft of contemporary urban theory. The concept and the practice are fairly simple. Urban explorers are people who go into spaces that most of us definitely do not venture into, from infrastructural sites like storm drains and the tops of bridge piers, to abandoned places like rambling Gothic hospitals, decommissioned military bases, and even shopping malls of the late 20th century. The gear is minimal: steel shank boots, gloves, lights, sewer waders, and often a camera. People get into these strange and often dangerous places, and once there, they often document what they find. There are a lot of very haunting photographs of these excursions out there. And I'm showing a few images here, both by urban explorers who make photos and professional photographers who engage in urban exploration practice to create their art. So the facts of the activity are basic and easily summarized, perhaps less interesting as I develop my research than the motivations to do it and the meanings behind it. Urban exploration is self-consciously defiant, and people risk harassment, arrest, and actual physical harm. So why do they do it? The more I researched, I came to the conclusion that urban exploration is something that people are drawn to because they want to have a very different relationship with their environment than most of us square types have. They see the city that we experience every day, where we wake up in our homes and proceed to places we are allowed to go as customers, as employees, ticket holders, as diners, guests. This normal everyday city can represent a small, very controlled, and in a sense, very boring place. They want to know the other side of it, the shadow side, where the city's actual service structure is, or where its history is buried, places where a certain kind of truth about our urban existence might be found. I've engaged in a little bit of this activity as well. Here are some pictures of the old tuberculosis ward on North Brother Island near Rikers in the East River. But a lot of my primary research involved talking to people who do this very avidly. And a little rhetorical analysis of what urban explorers say about why they do what they do, and more important, how they describe the experiences, yielded some really surprising and almost bizarre statements. Here's one from a really good photographer named Jeremy Blakesley, talking about the historic Bethlehem steel plant. And Jeremy says, "These places become like a drug for some reason. Places of this magnitude get you high, a combination of the history, the architecture, the light moving through, the smell of 100 years of motor oil in the internal combustion engines blowing all over the floor like blood. And you are just another layer of the history of this place," unquote. So to my surprise, what I first thought was some feat of macho transgression suddenly sounded like a transcendental or peak experience, or hallucination. So this guy starts sounding kind of more like this guy. Or maybe someone in between. He actually reminds me more of this guy. What Jeremy describes as a kind of experience that aesthetes and philosophers, Edmund Burke and Immanuel Kant especially, started talking about during the Enlightenment, one that we have largely lost touch with, called the sublime. The wanderer in this famous Friedrich painting is contemplating a scene of impossible nature, but we get the sense of the powerful experience he is having, an elusive combination of competing feelings: awe, if not terror, delight, contemplation, aesthetic appreciation. The effect of the sublime can be transformative and narcotic. Some of the first encounters with the sublime were found in great works of nature, as in this painting, but they soon transferred to great works of humanity. Despite the ever grander buildings and engineering works of early modernity, the edifices that could impart this level of passion were from another era. Whether ruins of classical antiquity or from medieval times, especially the hundreds of stripped and deteriorating abbeys of post-Reformation Europe. These crumbling buildings imparted the modern notions of the Gothic and the picturesque. So we see a main category of architecture that can evoke the sublime is ruins. The glory of ancient Rome reduced to the status of a quarry was a key image for writers and artists to ponder the destiny of every empire. In this painting by Joseph Gandy, even the then brand new Bank of England is envisioned in ruins. Curious thing. As encountered by grand tourists ranging from Elizabethan poets to Victorian painters, ruins were not inert and mute, but fonts of moral lessons to the sensitive observer. And what they spoke of is, of course, the narrative of history itself, that the way of all flesh and architecture is decay. So ruin spaces, even the ruins of our recent industrial past, can hold a charge that most normal, occupied, regularly maintained spaces cannot. Much the same goes for vast and machine-like infrastructural space, which is categorically different from quotidian architecture we normally get to experience. Other than their strangeness, there are a few reasons why people have unusual emotional and aesthetic experiences in these sites. One is that they feel out of joint, not just due to their weird physical condition, but that their position in time is uncertain. The seeming dislocation can alter basic perception that time is not, as we would suppose, a strictly one-way road. A commonly reported experience of urban archaeology is a fusion of the temporal dimension, what theorist Suzanne Kukler has described as, quote, the collapse of past, present, and future in the space of a single moment, unquote. So there's something about space and time that leads to these powerful reactions. But how about society? As much as my research looked back to the 18th century concepts and aesthetics, this is an activity very much about the present moment. I want to go a step further to propose that it serves a critical function as well, that people who do this are expressing a dissatisfaction with the status quo. Urban exploration has been around for a while, but it has positively boomed in the last decade. Our post-9/11 era, where the levels of surveillance and spatial control are higher than ever. So you have to work and to risk to get to know this side of the city, the shadow city. You have to break or bend or willfully forget certain strictures about being where you are generally allowed to be. Whether the motivations are unconsciously romantic or consciously political, they express the same thing, that the regulations of property and social manners enforce a kind of spatial normalcy. As described by urban archaeologists, these statements about the contemporary urban sublime critique our passage within and our experience of the city. Both are tightly controlled. Their practice articulates how some people may really want to experience the city, if even subconsciously. Only in the places hovering just outside of sanctioned access can we again experience astonishment in our built environment. I'm going to close with a quote from Julius Solis, an urban archaeologist and photographer who wrote a great book called New York Underground. When talking about the unique relationship some people forge with their environment through their explorations, she frames it like this. Although for most people, the leap from simple curiosity to an actual exploration is a large one, it is a means of transforming the anonymous city into a personal space. So I want to leave you with the idea that even if you don't find your way into the next abandoned building or a service tunnel that you come across, the lessons from people who do help us understand the possibility of a more intimate, if stranger, relationship with the space around us.
smart. And as I started jotting down notes, that I thought, oh, I'll ask him about this, I'll ask him about this. Then you answered them as you went along. So, you know, I won't say anything about Piranesi. From Piranesi on, including these things, it seems like the interest is this interesting combination of celebrating a great past, but also kind of reveling in its ruination. As you talk to these people who do this, did you find that they vary in the fractions of those two different impulses?
Yeah, there are various responses to that, and a lot of the people that I talk to are really into architecture, into preservation issues. They're really good amateur historians. They're sometimes filling in the literature in ways that scholarly people don't. On the other hand, there is this kind of fantasy world that they're excited by in the rhetoric, even though these are real spaces. They're there. They're kind of passing through the scrim and having a different sort of experience.
Some steampunk
some
illusion.
kind of like the last man on Earth idea has come up several times in with people that I talk to.
So both impulses are present in all of these individuals. Is there something peculiarly American about this? I wonder. America being, if we can grossly generalize, a place that really wants things to be new and spanking brand, bright and shiny and useful. And here this is all about the ruined, the dark, the useless.
I tried to trace the sort of precedent for the practice in the arguably the first Roman or the first urban explorers were the people who saw the bones of Rome.
Right.
And but in its modern incarnation, I would say that it started as a more North American thing because we have this recent industrial past. We have this even more recent sort of service retail age that all of a sudden is kind of being ruined or being encountered as a ruin. And yet it's sort of exporting back to Europe in a way where they have a sort of different, longer view on what a ruin can be. But they have this industrial infrastructure that is also kind of of an earlier mode, really. So they're back into it. One of the most popular UK forums is called 28 Days Later, after the zombie film. So again, you see this kind of shared pop culture sort of fantasy that excites people.
How does the story of the High Line figure in this, which was, of course, just an industrial ruin that people like these, I'm sure maybe even these individuals clambered over and snuck into and, oh, look, it's great. It's this great industrial age ruin. It's been saved. It is beloved. It's been transformed into this public park. How does that figure into this sensibility and what drives this?
Yeah, that's an excellent example, and there's also in the Bronx a place called Concrete Park Plant, or Concrete Plant Park rather, and it is indicative of how these spaces that have kind of been dropped off the map can sort of get back on, and they add a really important social function, which is they're adding public space, which is good. But then it's funny when you compare, for example, the Joel Sternfeld photographs of the High Line when it was still wild and overgrown, and you go there now, and everything is
Nice.
beautiful, everything is so nice, and but it's a different feeling. It's
Well,
a different feeling.
and I'm sure, I was wondering if these people feel about it the way certain people feel as though Times Square was better when it was nothing but porn theaters and food cart money players. Yeah.
I won't go that far, but I mean, the level, how interesting was it then, in a sense, a different kind of interesting, but there's something about the kind of negative associations or the challenges that these spaces represent that I think still people really engage with, and they want to, because everything is so safe now.
Well, exactly, and the search for the sublime, even if it's scary, dark, whatever its flavors of sublime, in the age of staring at a little screen all day, I think is an important thing to think about. Thanks.